Hey guys, welcome into another episode of Oklahoma Football Live, another 2023 recruiting update show, or just recruiting questions and answer show, or just kind of anything you want to talk about recruiting or Oklahoma football wise. We had a really good time a week or so ago, really just talking about where Oklahoma is in the 2023 recruiting cycle. And so we figured, hey, what better time to do it again? So again, my name is Jason Ray. I'll be your host for the next hour as we talk about everything recruiting. And as a reminder, as always, come follow me at Jason Ray One, and a lot of recruiting news, a lot of Oklahoma football news, just just stuff in general related to the Oklahoma football program overall. So, lots of things happening right now. Obviously, for Oklahoma, still they're a little bit in the dead period right now from a recruiting perspective, so not a whole lot of visits or anything like that going on, but still a lot of really good things going on in the month of August. So we'll get into some of the stuff that happened over the weekend, the Palace on the Prairie, the party at the Palace. My apologies, and just how significant that was for Oklahoma. Oklahoma had media availability today for the first time, kind of getting ready for fall camp, which everybody will report on Thursday, August 4th, and then they'll get started for with their first workout, first practice on August 5th. So things are getting rocking and rolling. Tons of things going on. Obviously, this is geared towards recruiting, but if you have any questions or comments or anything you want to get into um, related to Oklahoma starting off the year. So, like I said, a lot of good things happening. It's officially August, which that means it's officially football month. No, I know Oklahoma doesn't necessarily kick off until September 1st, September 3rd, I should say, but it's the first time we're going to have football in the month of August, and and what is typically and what always is the longest off season in any um, in any sport in the country, whether it's collegiate or professional. So a lot of NFL preseason stuff going on. A lot of people are involved in fantasy football, so that's exciting. So it is the month of football. High school football starts towards the I think the week zero games. There's a couple week zero games, August 25th and August 26th. And then week zero for college football kicks off on the 27th. A good opportunity to see Nebraska as they travel to Dublin, Ireland to face Northwestern, and then a couple of other games that are kind of interesting, but we'll certainly get into that. So again, let's start talking about recruiting and where Oklahoma lies currently. So Oklahoma is right now rated number 6 in 247 composite rankings overall. I think, as we talked about, was really just an extremely. I can't oversell enough how big of a recruiting event this was over the weekend. And I've heard some say one of the biggest recruiting weekends that Oklahoma has had, maybe ever, but certainly within the last few years, right? So I think number one, you saw the recruitment and the base almost out of nowhere for Colton Vasek, and he committed to Oklahoma a couple days ago, yesterday actually, and that was something that was really weird. Just to give you guys a little bit of an insight on how dynamic this staff has become on the recruiting trail, is that Vasek is a Texas legacy. His parents are both graduated from the University of Texas. He's just down the road from campus plays his high school football there at Austin Westlake, and Oklahoma was in the mix, but I don't think that anyone felt that Oklahoma was the leader in that recruitment. There was a while, for a certain period of time, Texas led, and then you had some other folks that were in the mix. Oregon was in the mix for a while, and I think a lot of folks from Oregon thought that they had him, and then just bam, he was blown away by Oklahoma staff, the culture. kind of the family aspect of everything that's going on at Oklahoma right now. Just the relationships that he's been able to build with Miguel Chavis and with obviously Brent Venables and staff. So he committed to Oklahoma, and expect him to be one of those guys that will push for other commitments. Obviously in the class of 23. So go down the list. As right now, Oklahoma has 19 commitments. I mentioned a couple minutes ago that Oklahoma is number 6 in the overall 247 composite, just behind Texas. Oklahoma's at 267.31, Texas 273.57. So that's really the first layer. So I think anybody that's been active on Twitter has noticed over the weekend there's been as many as 5 to 6 locks that have been tweeted out from various folks, within the program, various folks that cover um, recruiting on a closer, kind of a closer scale as well. So certainly all of those locks won't be. I mean, there's some ideas on some of them won't be determined until a later date. So just a few folks that were at the recruiting event this past weekend. We'll go through some of those guys, and who I think Oklahoma's probably got about 10 more guys that they're really in the mix on, and they really really feel good about where they're at now. Kind of remains to be seen how many guys Oklahoma's going to take. There might be a couple of guys that are within this top 100, top 150 that specifically on the defensive line that Oklahoma just doesn't have, may not necessarily have room for. So I don't know that certainly Oklahoma is going to get all 10 of these guys, and they may have to unfortunately turn a couple away. But I think Oklahoma is about as red hot as you can expect on the recruiting front. So let's go through here, and then we'll pause afterwards and go through any questions, any recruits that you have any specific questions on, timeline, where Oklahoma stands with some of these guys, and then we'll kind of go back and forth and see, if anybody has any questions. So John, got your question here. I say before, but what's the min max target? So I kind of talked about that a little bit. I think probably from anywhere from 27 to 29 kids is probably where Oklahoma's going to be. I certainly don't think that you're going to see the Sooners take anywhere near as many transfers as they grad transfers or transfers from another team as they did this past year. I think more so. I think for no other reason, I think than the fact that Brent really really prefers high school kids as opposed to transfer. So I think he likes the development there, and those types of things. So don't really see them taking a lot. But yeah, I would say anywhere from the 26, 27 to 29 range is where Oklahoma's looking at. So let's go down the list and talk through some of these guys. So the first one is Anthony Evans, 4-star wide receiver out of Converse, Texas, 5'11", 185. He's a guy that's got several crystal balls to Oklahoma. I think he's a commitment. He's a guy that's going to commit at some point in the certainly some point in the month of August. I think from everything that I've been told, I think he's still Oklahoma is the destination there. There's a couple of other teams that are in play, but I still think that he is a guy that will. When all's said and done, he'll end up at Oklahoma. I think you've got Georgia and Texas A&M to a certain degree that are in the mix. I think it's probably more of an Oklahoma and Georgia battle, I guess, if you would, at this point. But I think Oklahoma is firmly in the lead for him as well. So the next guy that I talk about is Malachi Coleman. And guys, this is another kid that if Oklahoma is able to get this kid, that is two just remarkable victories for this recruit, for this staff. When you think about getting, we talked about Vosick, getting him out of the University of Texas backyard. Very same thing with Malachi Coleman. He's a 4-star wide receiver tight end. I think he's really more of a when you look at him, he's ranked as the number 7 overall athlete. Probably would be more of a kind of a wide receiver, tight end at Oklahoma. Certainly could play the other side of the ball, but I think kind of like him there in that type of tweener situation. And so it's been long rumored that he's going to be a Husker at the end of the day. However, he's adopted. His parents are both his adopted parents are both very, very strong Nebraska people, Nebraska supporters. I think he's got 5 or 6 crystal balls all to Nebraska. He's been following to Nebraska as well, but the consensus is if he's not, all of these signs point to him going to Nebraska. If he's not going, why hasn't he committed yet? So I think the big news of the day is that he's going to come to Norman for an official visit. He's been very pro Oklahoma on social media over the last, really kind of since the recruiting weekend this weekend. Very, it was a lot of commentary around Colton Bosick, with his commitment, a lot of commentary related to, everything that happened this weekend from a recruiting standpoint. And so I think this is one he's going to commit mid-October. I think October 15th is his official date. This is one to keep an eye on, as I think initially it kind of looked like, I think not necessarily initially, but kind of through through the recruiting period, it looked like he was a very, very strong lean to Nebraska, and then Oklahoma's really, really got in there, and they've got that official visit. So, not sure what this will end up coming down to, guys. I don't necessarily think that this will. I mean, the Oklahoma-Nebraska game may play a little bit of a role in there, but I think overall, maybe the success that Nebraska has or lack thereof versus the Oklahoma, what success Oklahoma has this year may play a role there. But I think he's a guy, that I think is increasingly trending towards Oklahoma at this point. So let me go back to the comments here and see if there's any questions before that. Is it too early to speculate on Stacy Gage? Yeah, I mean, I think it's bizarre. 2024 is something that's so far out there. It's kind of hard to talk about, but they did have several 24, 25 kids in sort of what was really kind of a camp-like situation early, kind of midweek last week. But Gage is a guy that's certainly high on Oklahoma, and I think Oklahoma's high on him. But I think, that recruitment kind of remains to be seen. Carvan, so Oklahoma has DJ Hick, so he's another guy. Like he's the guy that I think was really more of a pleasant surprise. I think from the overall weekend, I think he was extremely pleased with what he saw at Oklahoma. So Texas A&M had what they were calling kind of a pool party type of situation this weekend, and the way this was supposed to go is DJ Hicks was supposed to come to Oklahoma, Thursday, and then go Thursday and maybe a little bit Friday, and then go to College Station. He never actually made it to College Station. He stayed at Oklahoma the entire time, and so I feel very good about where Oklahoma is with him. Now, he's not a guy that's going to commit soon. I think originally he was going to be a December, January commitment. I don't know, based on where Oklahoma sits with him right now, I don't know that it's going to necessarily go that long, as long as the momentum stays the same with Oklahoma. I thought coming into this weekend, I thought it was, it's pretty much a 2-horse race, at least at this point. From a leader perspective with Oklahoma and A&M, I thought Oklahoma led slightly over A&M. I think as it sits right now, and things change and things move and ebb and flow, as you know, from a recruiting perspective, a lot can happen between now and December. But I think Oklahoma has a very sizable lead in the recruitment for DJ Hicks. Just so you guys know, David DJ, same thing, same guy. So I think you have to love. If anything happened this weekend, um, that was more important than maybe anything else, it was how Oklahoma wowed DJ Hicks in his, kind of in his being here this weekend. So I think that was a very positive. So right now, I think Oklahoma has a sizable lead, but still a lot of time to go. Julian, thanks for coming on. Hey, JC, I know this is kind of down the line, but do you think OU can pose a bigger threat to Bama than Georgia in a few years when they join the SEC? I think I think it just remains to be seen, right? I mean, I think the one thing now you've shown that you've seen out of the staff is they can recruit, which I think a lot of us thought that, but what they are able to do, Brent Venables still hasn't coached a game. Obviously, right? Miguel Chavis, who is just killing it, really can do no wrong on the recruiting trail right now, still has not been a position coach. So I think now the translation to on the field is where a lot of this stuff goes. They're still they're gonna have a great recruiting class. I think at the end of the day, this will be a top 5 recruiting class. Maybe could get up to number 3. I think they're going to be no worse than top 10. So years as well, I think will be very, very paramount going into the SEC. Ron, thanks for coming on. Oklahoma, just like other schools, don't have any. I think you mean what I think you mean by that is, obviously no one is actually signed, still delivered yet, and that's true. And I think one of the things for Oklahoma and just for everybody as well, but being able to hold this momentum until signing day is obviously big, and I think. I don't know that that's always necessarily true. You're always going to have some kids that are just going to go where the money is. But there was a kid that could just come into Alabama yesterday or today. Quinter Osborne, I believe is his name, where he came out and said he's take the rings over the Lamborghinis. And so a lot of kids they want to win. Yeah, the money is big, but they still want to be able to win at a high level as well. So let's go back to some of the kids here that were on the recruiting weekend. Jordan Renaud, 4-star defensive lineman out of Tyler, Texas, number 7 defensive lineman in the country, number 82 overall. And again, this is another This is another battle recruitment from in the state of Texas that's really between Oklahoma and Alabama. I think coming into the weekend, Oklahoma was really kind of trending in the positive direction for Renaud, but I think he was a guy that was still pretty heavily in a battle between Oklahoma and Alabama. I think since that has happened, I think Oklahoma has taken over what happened this weekend. Oklahoma has taken a sizable lead in the recruitment for Renaud. I think you've also got a situation where Alabama, I don't know that they've necessarily moved on, but with the signing of Hunter Osborne, another 4-star defensive lineman, I think it kind of paves the way. If you read between the lines a little bit, looks like that's somebody that's a kid that's going to go to Oklahoma. So really, really like where Oklahoma stands here with him, and I think Oklahoma will eventually end up getting Renaud. I'm not sure when he's going to, when he's going to make his commitment, but as of right now, it's trending in a very positive way for Oklahoma. Tasuli Akana, he was a guy that was supposed to get up to Oklahoma, just wasn't able to make it. This is Brent's guy. This is the kid that he typically, I've told the story I think a time or two with Mark, but I kind of give credit where credit is due. Take this from Parker Thune. He had mentioned the story where Brent usually takes. There's a couple of guys in every recruiting class that he kind of earmarks, and this is a guy that he kind of sinks his teeth into, so to speak. And Akon is one of those kids for Oklahoma. Very, very quiet recruitment. He's a guy that's not going to say a lot on social media, not going to put a lot out there, but from the people that I listen to, I think that camp is still in the recruitment. The people that are close to that feel like Akana is a guy that's going to come to Oklahoma at the end of the day. So we'll see how that continues to go. I don't see anything happening, relatively soon related to Akana. He'll be in kind of an in-season guy, but I still think that until I hear anything differently, still think that he's a guy that ends up in Norman without a doubt. Right now, who do you think the other four locks are? I could see it being maybe 6 or 7 different guys. So let's. I think. I think you've got Jordan Raynaud, who is probably one of those locks. I think you've probably got Makari Vickers, who is one of those locks. I think you've got Jacoby Johnson from Mustang, who is one of those locks. I think Hicks is probably one of them as well. And then, it remains to be seen. I think the LSU safety, the safety that has committed to LSU, I should say, from Denton, Ryan Yates. I think he's a guy that I think you can put him down as probably one of those locks as well. And then there's a couple of other kids that are back in the in the mix. So certainly think those guys are there. And there's you've got Makari Vickers. Safety out of Tallahassee, Florida. Again, Oklahoma's going into other people's backyards and taking some of their best players. Top 10 safety overall in the country, top 100, top 10 safety in the country, top 100 overall. He is going to commit on August 26th. I think there were some thoughts out there that maybe he pulls that up a little bit, but I think he has committed. On social media, he even confirmed that he's still committing on the 26th. Tons of crystal balls to Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma is in an excellent position for him as well. Yeah, exactly. Zachary, completely agree with you. I think he's going to be an outstanding defensive lineman, and I think just overall, I think if Oklahoma ends up getting some of the guys that that we think that he is going to get, like you've got PJ Adebare, who's already locked in. You've got Colton Fossick, who's already locked in. If they can get to Suli Akana, who is another guy there at the edge position, and you got Jordan Raynaud, DJ Hicks inside. Oklahoma could very well be looking at 2 or 3 5-star guys on the defensive line, and this is at a area that Oklahoma has not recruited to in a very long time. I think this will be a lot of people I thought this will be the best recruiting class overall, but specifically on the defensive line that Oklahoma has had since they've started, doing recruiting and this measuring it in the way that they are now. Maybe the best since the 80s. So that's high praise coming back from the Switzer days, but I think there is a distinct chance that Oklahoma certainly will have one of the best recruiting classes that they've had in quite some time. Biggie is you still wanting Kelby Collins? I don't know necessarily about wanting Kelby, but I think he is. I think he's going to drop his top 6 or top 8 here pretty soon. I expect, Oklahoma will absolutely be in there, but I think he's very, very high on Florida. So I think he's probably a Gator at the end of the day. And I think, I think it's one of those things that it's okay. I think if you're an Oklahoma fan, I don't necessarily want to say bigger fish to fry, but I think there's guys that Oklahoma has much better relationships with that you anticipate that'll Oklahoma will land those pledges without Kelby Collins. So certainly, I would, if I had to say it right now, I think he's probably Florida bound. So a couple of other guys that we've talked about a little bit here: Jacoby Johnson, 4-star athlete, number 2 overall player in the state of Oklahoma, number 6 athlete, number 84 overall um, in the 247 composite. This guy's been a heavy lean to Oklahoma for quite some time. It's just kind of a matter of timing with Jacoby. Not sure when this will happen. I think it's probably before the season starts, but so I would anticipate something happening with Jacoby sometime in the month of August. And again, would be shocked if this isn't an Oklahoma guy. He's been pretty high in Oklahoma for a while. Heavy crystal balls heading to Oklahoma as well. So I think he will be a Sooner at the end of the day. Peyton Bowen is a guy that we've talked about a lot. One of the it's a little bit of a strange recruitment, so to speak, right? Very, I mean, I think you can say that. I mean, kind of similar to Malachi Coleman, even though Peyton Bowen is already committed to Notre Dame. Um, from some of the people that I talked to, again, he had a nice time, a good time at Oklahoma. But I think this is a kid that's probably within a couple of weeks. I think he wants to get this out of the way and get this done before their season starts, right? So I think he just wants to be able to enjoy his senior season. So kind of interesting, even though he's actually committed to Notre Dame. I think probably between Notre Dame, Texas A&M, and Oklahoma, Notre Dame's probably the least likely place where he lands. And so, I mean, I think at a high level, Oklahoma likes where they're at with Bowen. But at the end of the day, he's been to Oklahoma probably, I mean, more than he's been to anywhere else. He's visited probably 8 or 9 times to Oklahoma. And so you think, why hasn't he pulled the trigger? And so, I don't necessarily know, why that is, but he's definitely not fully committed to Notre Dame, kind of in the way that Brent Venables and the staff believes a commitment is, right. So I think Oklahoma's still in good shape with him. Couple more weeks. I think it's not anything that I don't think any of the locks over the weekend were for Bowen, but I still think the staff likes where they're at with him. So it just kind of remains to be seen how that goes. But I do think from everything that I've heard, within a few weeks is when he'll officially make that decision between the Notre Dame, Oklahoma, and Texas A&M. Was it Oklahoma did go to Texas A&M as well this weekend for their pool party recruiting event, and so we'll see how that ends up going. But if I had to give, I would give Oklahoma maybe a slight lean over Texas A&M and Notre Dame, but there's definitely no lock, nothing imminent. And I think we'll just see kind of how the wind blows here over the next few weeks. But I think he's visited Oklahoma enough where he just really likes it. Maybe he's just having problems, kind of making that decision. But we'll see where that goes. Like I said, I don't think this will go super far into the season. I think we're likely to see a decision out of him, fairly soon. And we talked a little bit about Ryan Yates. I think he's a guy that I think a lot of people think was one of the locks over the weekend. Would not at all be surprised to see that flip happen. I feel a little bit stronger on that one maybe than I do with Peyton Bowen, but I think he'll be a Sooner time. I'm not sure on the timetable with him as well, so we'll just keep kind of keep locked in with him and see what that looks like. And then we talked about Vickers as well. I do think he's a lock as well. He is going to announce that commitment on August 26th that we mentioned, but you feel really good about where Oklahoma is. And so if some of these things end up keep trending the way that they are, you've got two, Oklahoma versus Alabama battles, but right now you like where Oklahoma is at against where in both of these battles versus Alabama. So that's incredibly exciting if you're an Oklahoma fan, right? That Oklahoma is going head to head with Alabama, and they may go 2-0 in some of these in some of these situations. So I think you really, really like what Oklahoma's doing on the recruiting trail, and they are about as on fire as you could possibly be right now, being number 6, and where they were from, at the end of June until where they're at right now. Um, Sitting at number 6 and really in a good place. And I had heard something the other day that the most Oklahoma has ever had, I believe, in terms of top 100 players in one class is 3. And so right now, when you look at where this Oklahoma class could be, they could have anywhere in the neighborhood of 8 to 10 top 100 kids overall. So they're blowing some things out of the water. So I think it'll be, like I said, the next step is to see what this season looks like for Oklahoma. We can kind of get into that if you want to. I see some questions related to, what's going on. I hear some. I don't know if it's just um, Carvan or anyone else, but if you can't hear me, I don't. Let me know if there's something else going on my side. Everything looks to be fine on my side, but if you can't hear me, let me know, and we may have to restart this or do something. Um, but let's look at a couple of the questions that you guys have here related to. So, Ron, who's going to start at center? I think it's obviously it's too early to tell. I think the big question is, did Andrew Rame take that next step from a strength perspective and do what he needs to do? I think he's probably certainly your leader in the clubhouse. I think you've got a couple other guys that are capable. Um, there, right? But I think he's the guy that I think the staff who they would prefer to be, because he's got a little bit more athletic ability. And so I think the one thing that he said, I heard in some of the, I don't know if that was specifically today he was made available or last week, that talking about how much stronger this unit is, just as a unit on the offensive line than they were last year. I think they had mentioned that everybody can now bench over 300 pounds, and in the last couple of years they've only had 2 or 3. So that's, I mean, obviously an indictment to Wiley and what the strength and conditioning staff was doing at Oklahoma before then. But I think certainly it shows to the impact that Schmitty has had and will continue to have on this team as well. Let's see. But OU will be good on offense this year. Agree. Yeah, definitely agree. I think how good, is at the end of the day, we'll see. I think I think Oklahoma will be better on the offensive line. I think you like what you have from a depth perspective at the running back room, even though some of that is inexperienced depth. I think you have a little bit more depth. So there's certainly not a Kennedy Brooks in the room, at least the way he runs. But I think you like a lot of the parts that you have from Oklahoma. I'm very interested to see what that battle looks like and how those kids kind of shake out um, here early on. Obviously, kind of as offensive coordinator Jeff Lebby said, it kind of starts with Eric Gray, obviously, and then you've got Javonte Barnes, you've got Marcus Major, you've got Gavin Sawchuk, you've got Tawi Walker, you've got Bino Thompson, the transfer from UCF that had played a lot over the last couple of years at UCF, took last year off. So you've got guys in there. I kind of thought that coming in that Sawchuk might have been destined for a red shirt, but talked a lot about DeMarco Murray talked a lot about him today, talking about him either, if not one of the fastest players on the team overall. And so I'm very interested to see how that shakes out a little bit. I definitely think that Eric Gray is going to be utilized more towards his skill set. And so, the thing that this whole staff preaches and Jeff Lebby preaches as well is, being incredibly physical up front, running the football, and they have the skill position on the outside. But I think two of the biggest keys to this offense being as good as they need to be, Dylan Gabriel staying healthy, and then the offensive line, taking that next step. I talked about this a couple of times with Mark, but when you to a certain degree, it was a little bit unfair because a lot of people compared this offensive line over the last couple of years to the 2017, 2018, and even certainly to a certain degree 2019 as well. So when you look at some of those guys from 2017 and 2018, all five of those guys are in the NFL right now. So that's rarefied company that you have all five of your starting offensive linemen, from one team going to the next level. So I think we'll see if some of those guys are able to take the next step. And Anton Harrison and Wanye Morris at the tackle position, are they, on Anton Harrison has all the ability in the world, has the body, and didn't always play as hard as he needed to. What does he bring? Wanye Morris, the same thing. He's kind of transformed his body, looks a lot better. What is he able to do? And some of the inside guys and what the depth looks like. And so I think that'll be very, very pivotal to how Oklahoma, how they're able to move the ball and put points on the board this year. Let's see. Good question. Did Joe C open up the checkbook after Riley left? I think so. I think what happened is, I think when Riley left in the manner that he did, I think a lot of people, and specifically when they started talking to Brent through this process, understood like there's a lot of things that they didn't necessarily have in place that they needed to have in place, not only to be able to compete nationally, but to be able to compete in the SEC. So I think, yeah, to a certain degree, the checkbook got open, but I think these are some things that these is who Oklahoma wanted. Brent wanted to be here. Oklahoma wanted Brent. So to make a lot of these things happen, kind of off the field, just they've beefed up their off the field coaching staff. They're going through a lot of I think facility uplift or upgrades, whatever you want to call it. Facelift, I guess, is the word that I was originally looking for. But yeah, so I think at a certain degree they've done a lot of these things. A specific recruiting department which is paying dividends early on, and so I think there was an understanding of what needed to happen, and I think to be honest, I think Oklahoma. I think Riley kind of woke up a sleeping giant, so to speak. I think there was a little bit of complacency and things going on in different areas that, that I don't know if that's something that Lincoln ever brought up or had struggles with, but I think it was something that was now understood. So I think there is a lot more that incentive that's been put on everything that needs to be done to make this program successful. Oklahoma took Bama. Yep, Jay Valai was the DB coach at Bama. Also has some experience in the NFL as well. Jake, thanks for the question. Do you think Oklahoma may be slipping under people's radar a little bit this year? I think yeah. I mean, I think one thing that I think this offense has a chip on their shoulder through the spring, and obviously that's going to carry on into fall camp and certainly into the season, is that I think a lot of the assumption nationally and maybe even regionally here for people that cover Oklahoma and cover Oklahoma or just cover college football nationally, thinks that, okay, Riley left, now Oklahoma is going to take a significant step back. on the offensive side of the ball. And so, so I think they'll have that chip on their shoulder, just kind of proving that this is a team that can be, that can be much better. I think you're going to see. I mean, you've seen this a little bit with Baylor pick number 1 and Oklahoma number 2 in the Big 12. I think you've seen this a little bit with Oklahoma only having one player on the Big 12 first team offense and defense combined, and that was a special teams guy with Mike Turk. I think you'll see that when the rankings come out for the coaches poll and the AP, that Oklahoma is probably a little bit below what they've been in the past, probably anywhere from 8 to 12. I would anticipate where Oklahoma is. And so yeah, I think it's different nationally, the projections. I don't think there's very many people that will have Oklahoma as a playoff team, so they don't have anyone remotely in the Heisman conversation. So I think there's a lot of things that might be, and I think Oklahoma, a lot of fans and the team may revel in that fact. And so I think this team is going to be a lot better than people think that it will. Now there's, when you look at 40% roster turnover, meaning as something that Venable said in the at the Big 12 media days, that they have 40% of this roster has never played a football game for University of Oklahoma. That's significant, and that can't be discounted. But I think at the same time, that's really good talent that Brent and staff was able to bring in, either through the transfer portal or through that recruiting cycle last year. And so we'll see how they work early on, and we'll see what happens. But I think I'm leaning more towards this team being 10-2, 11-1 in the regular season. And so if you throw out a 10-2 season, you win a Big 12 championship, maybe you sneak into the playoffs, maybe you're in a New Year's Six. I think if you do that, at a minimum, let's say you go, let's say that you're 10-3 or 11-2, one of the two, and you're in a New Year's Six bowl game. I think that's an outstanding season, and I think that gives you everything that you need to know to understand for these recruits to say, okay, this team's a lot better. This team's better on defense. There's not any reliance on Lincoln Riley. This team is going to be much better. I think then you can continue to see that recruiting build to maybe consensus top 5 recruiting class every single year. Another comment here. Not one team in the Big 12 knows how to prepare for Oklahoma, contrary to the last 4 years. I think that's you've got a little bit of film from Ole Miss's perspective that you can prepare for. Obviously, you've got film for from Brent's defenses at Clemson that you know how to prepare for a little bit. But I think, to your point, specifically this team this year, in terms of what it looks like for Oklahoma, will be tailored to the specifics of this team, right? So I think to that extent, it's interesting. To that extent, yeah, you can watch a little film. But I think Oklahoma is so multiple on defense, and Venables brings so many different looks that it's really hard to prepare for what Oklahoma is going to throw out there. So it's going to be really, really interesting these first couple of weeks of the regular season. Against Kent State and UTEP, that teams that Oklahoma is obviously very athletically better than. And so I think the thing that I look for is, what does that physicality look like up front on both sides of the ball? Is Oklahoma, are they busting any assignments? And how does that, what's that install and learning? How's the install went from August 4th, 5th up until, that first game of the year, and on September 3rd, and is Oklahoma, able to play at the level that a lot of people think they are early on as they head into that road trip to Nebraska in week 3. David, thanks for the question. Do you think Lebby will use Gray as mismatches catching passes out of the backfield? I absolutely think he will. I think you're going to see Gray catch anywhere from maybe 25 to 35 passes this year out of the backfield as a running back. And historically, this isn't something that Riley's like to do. He doesn't throw to the backside of the backfield a lot. Even from a check down perspective, Oklahoma's not really done that a ton, and so I think that's going to be a more integral part of the game, specifically with Gray having that mismatch. To your point, hopefully you can set that up in such a way that you look at getting him matched up against linebackers, and so I think Oklahoma has the depth at the running back position to throw 3 or 4 or 5 guys out there, and then allow Gray to maybe play outside a little bit more in space. Let's see. What other questions? Sorry, what was my prediction for the offensive line? So, I think coming into fall camp, um, I like. So I'll just say what the guys on the offensive line. Then we can talk about production. I think offensive line, you got Rame as one of your centers, and I think I like Wanye Morris, and I like Anton Harrison as your two tackles, and then I think I like Cade Matower as one of the guards. And then, my gosh, the name is escaping me right now. UCLA, Chris Murray as your other guard. But I think there's a couple of guys that will be interesting. I've heard this on 2 occasions now with Brent talking up Tyler Guyton, the transfer in from TCU, and so I think he has an opportunity to at least push from a 2 deep perspective. Savion Bird is a guy to keep your eye on that I think he has an opportunity there. I think Marcus Hicks is a guy to keep your eye on. Does he, from a position change, he's over a year removed from that position change now, and that there's more expectations on his shoulders, and I think probably would have for himself. So I think he's a guy, to kind of keep an eye on as well inside. And then Bray Walker's another guy. Like, just what is he? When's the light going to come on for him? So I think this offensive line will be better, but it's really interesting to watch some of these battles early on in the camp and see what this looks like. So I think they're going to be better. Those would be my 5 guys coming in, but we'll see how that shakes out. Let's see if there's any other questions here. All right. Well, if there's no other questions here, we'll cut it off a little bit early. Thanks everybody for joining, and we'll talk to you guys again on Friday. Thanks.